We're jumping straight into the hilarious and, let's be honest, sometimes completely maddening practical wisdom pulled from a 44-year marriage. We're going to uncover why marrying your absolute opposite is actually a feature, not a bug. So, if you've ever just stared at your partner, totally baffled by how their brain works, well, you're in exactly the right place.
The author of our source material hits us with this gem right away. He writes, "I own 3 spices, and one of them is mystery seasoning because the label fell off sometime during the Reagan administration." I mean, it's hilarious, right? Because you can pair this ridiculous setup to his wife, who literally alphabetizes her spice rack, and it just perfectly captures what happens when 2 completely different people decide to, build a whole life together.
And that brings us to his central piece of advice. This is actually the wisdom he gives his grandchildren when they ask how on earth he's stayed married for over 4 decades. He tells them this really profound truth. Nobody warns you that you aren't just marrying a person. You are marrying an entirely different operating system. Just think about how liberating that is for a second. It means your disagreements, they aren't necessarily personal. They're literally just the result of 2 completely distinct sets of programming trying to run the exact same household.
Let's actually break this analogy down a bit. So, you've got the wife's operating system. Let's call it iOS. It's modern, it's highly organized, systematically updated. And then you have the husband's. Basically an old Nokia, indestructible, for sure, but it's got a very, very basic interface. Now, both operating systems get the job done in their own unique way, but the hard reality is neither one updates easily, and that is especially true when they're trying to interface with each other. Naturally, this inherent mismatch is going to lead to some friction. But here's the thing nobody really tells young couples. You don't actually fall in love with someone who is exactly like you, because if you did, frankly, one of you would be entirely unnecessary. The source material points out that biology actually wires men and women to notice completely different things, to worry about different things, and ultimately to solve problems using 2 totally different toolkits.
Let's look at how this plays out in the real world with something simple like a leaky tap. Okay, step 1. The husband decides he needs to have a man-to-tap conversation and just fix it himself. Step 2, 4 hours pass. Step 3, the bathroom is now completely flooded. Which brings us to step 4. They finally call a professional. This totally doomed logic is in direct contrast with his wife's instinct from minute 1, which was simply, see the leak, call a plumber. They aren't dysfunctional, they just have 2 entirely different toolkits trying to fix the exact same house.
Now this leads us right into this massive modern relationship myth. You've definitely heard it, if he really loved me, he'd just know. If you scroll through literally any relationship page online, you'll see some variation of this. But the author just completely shatters this idea. He points out, hey, he's been staring at his wife since the Carter administration, and he still doesn't always know why she's upset. Honestly, sometimes she doesn't even know why she's upset. Expecting your partner to be a mind reader is just a setup for entirely preventable resentment. Nobody just knows.
And of course, this inherent mismatch eventually leads to moments like this. A massive, incredibly tense 45-minute standoff. Just a total communication breakdown, where neither operating system could figure out what the other one was even trying to process. And what do you think this epic standoff was actually about? A cushion. Literally 45 minutes of pure tension over a couch cushion. But the absolute crucial takeaway here is that these massive fights, they are rarely about the actual object of the argument. It's really just about those 2 completely different operating systems clashing and completely failing to read each other's code.
So, the big question, how do we actually fix this? Let's pivot to what the author brilliantly calls the curiosity remedy. The truly silly part about all of this friction is that we tend to treat the word different like it's some terrible insult. It isn't. In fact, being different is the whole design of a relationship. It is exactly what keeps the machine running. Think of it kinda like a garden. Left to her own devices, the wife would have a fully color-coded 5-year plan for the soil. The husband, he'd plant exactly 1 tomato, totally forget about it, and just call it rustic. But here's the actual magic of the mismatch. Because her meticulous planning balances out his looseness. Together, they actually get tomatoes. Those differences are exactly what make the partnership productive and really whole.
Which brings us to a pretty stark warning from the text. Hostage negotiation. That's when you're trying to turn your spouse into an exact copy of yourself, instead of, actually being in a marriage. The author really emphasizes that the core difficulty couples face today is just wanting their partner to think exactly like they do. But forcing someone to mirror your operating system, that's not a marriage, that's taking hostages. The real remedy is to stop letting those differences frustrate you.
So what does this remedy look like in everyday life? Well, it all comes down to asking one simple question. Walk me through why this system works for you. If you write anything down today, make it this. This is your core, actionable takeaway. When your partner does something totally unexpected, like, say, reorganizing a closet you didn't even know needed organizing, don't snap. Just shift your mindset. Get curious. Ask them to walk you through their system.
And when you ask that question with genuine curiosity, something pretty incredible happens. You might actually learn something about spices. Or, maybe more importantly, you might learn something about yourself. Approaching your differences with curiosity rather than sheer annoyance proves that curiosity is, hands down, the ultimate relationship tool. It's the only chord that actually bridges the gap between iOS and Nokia.
Now, before we wrap up the author actually made a promise to his grandkids that he would include a dad joke in the material, and we absolutely have to deliver on that. So, here we go. Why did the man bring a ladder to marriage counseling?
Because things kept escalating. Okay, I know, you can groan, but honestly, it's a perfectly placed bit of humor to just remind us not to take ourselves or our inevitable relationship clashes too seriously. Sometimes, laughter is really just another way to bridge the gap between those different toolkits.
And speaking of escalating, that brings us right to the conclusion of today's lesson. We've learned that replacing frustration with curiosity is really the secret to navigating a marriage between two totally different operating systems. We've learned to embrace the mystery seasoning, the rustic tomatoes, and we finally learned to stop treating different like it's a dirty word. But as you might guess, there is a whole lot more to uncover in this source material.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought pulled straight from the author's next chapter. Is I heard you the biggest lie in every relationship? It's a fascinating question, isn't it? It instantly makes you stop and evaluate your own communication habits. So keep that question in the back of your mind, stay curious about your partner's operating system, and we will explore the answer to that exact question in our next explainer. Thanks for learning with us today.